How hard is it to be a partner?
I think it's a tremendous amount of responsibility. There's a lot of responsibility in that. There's a lot of sleepless nights in that.
How you became a partner and what that meant along that journey.
Sometimes a strength can become a weakness.
I'm not sure I see enough of that today.
That's one of the pieces of advice that I give to college kids that I talk to. I'm like, when you're interviewing, send a thank you note, not a thank you text, not a thank you email, send a thank you note.
How did you become a greeting card guru?
That was my mom. My mom was always sending cards to...
Welcome to Leadership Backstage, the podcast that exposes the raw truths behind leadership. We dive deep into blind spots, failures, and bold moves, questioning the myths leaders cling to and challenging you to think differently. Each episode brings unfiltered stories from CEOs, executives, and thought leaders who fought through scaling pains, culture clashes, and high-stakes decisions. This is where courage, clarity, and breakthrough thinking collide, sparking insights that actually matter. Here's your host, Claudia Williams.
Hi, and welcome to today's episode of Leadership Backstage. Today, we're going behind the curtain to uncover blind spots and breakthroughs with a woman who, if you tell her it can't be done, she's going to sit you down and say, oh yeah, well, here's the plan and here's how we're going to do it. And if you look up perseverance in the dictionary, I guarantee you're going to find her picture. She is a partner at the Pavone Group. Please help me welcome Amy Murray. Amy, thank you so much for joining me.
It's so nice to be with you today.
Thank you. Thank you. I love your story, your journey, and the sheer, utter definition of perseverance. Where did this grit and determination come from?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. I think, I'll give my mom and dad a lot of credit. We were raised, my brother, sister, and I, we were raised with a good work ethic, a lot of common sense. I think we had parents that by today's standards probably would be strict, but they expected a lot of us very early on. And we were raised in that sort of environment. And I think it certainly has paid off as I've grown into adulthood and into my professional career in that, you're a person of your word. You figure things out. If you don't know the answer, you ask questions of people who can help you figure out the answer. So I think a lot of resourcefulness. I think that was always something, even growing up, it wasn't, we were not spoon fed the answers all the time. It was like, how do you come to the answer on your own? And so I give my mom and dad a lot of credit there. Certainly mentors along the way, but my mom and dad get a lot of credit for that.
You're jogging memories for me too, because I remember every time any one of my sisters or I would say, Dad, how do you spell whatever, he would say, go get the dictionary and look it up.
Yep. Get the red book.
Yes. Go get the dictionary.
And the almanac.
Yes. Go look in the encyclopedia back when we had to actually pull there was no Google and we had to look things up in books. He always made us look it up and figure it out for ourselves. And then if we had a question, we could ask him for more information or help us understand whatever it is we read. But yeah, nothing was spoon-fed.
Oh, and I used to get so mad when he would do that. When I would say, like, how do you spell it? Get the red book. And it would make me so angry.
Yeah. Little did we know or appreciate the life skills that they were imparting upon us that I'm not sure I see enough of that today. How did you get into your career? How did that path come along?
I would love to say that there was some grand plan behind it, but I went to Elizabethtown College. I majored in business and I graduated in 1990, we were on the cusp of a recession, I guess, at that time. And my attitude was I knew I wanted to get a job and start to network and start to figure it out. A lot of times when I talk to college kids, I'll tell them, I think sometimes they're under such pressure to have it all figured out. And sometimes those first couple of jobs out the gate are really to help you figure out what you don't want to do. So that was sort of my attitude going into this. I sort of lucked out because I saw an ad in the newspaper, how antiquated that sounds, but I saw the help wanted ad, and it was for a traffic administrator in an advertising agency. And I had no idea what that entailed, but I thought, well, hey, that kind of sounds, I was right off I don't know if you remember 30 something, but 30 something had been like the hit show of the time. Yes. And, it was based in an advertising agency. And I was like, I think that looks really cool. I had dreams of marrying Michael from 30 something. As it turns out, I married Elliot instead, but because I ended up with a creative director. But I came out and I knew that I wanted to get a job. I wanted to start my career. I was lucky that I got that job. I learned, and the great thing about what was traffic at that time, now would be considered project management, was, you really got to know the business from the ground up because you had to work with everyone. So you had to understand what made the creatives tick and the media people tick and the account people tick and what clients cared about and all that sort of thing. So I really got a good sort of primer of the entire business in that role. And then subsequently, a few of the creatives left to start what became Pavone. And so, that was about 2.5 years. And then I joined what became Pavone, and it's been almost 33 years since. There are people that will say, like, oh, you've worked the same place for 33 years. And no, like, I've worked about 8 different places, depending on where we were in our growth, what was happening at the time, the types of clients that we were working with. So very different experiences, all under sort of the same umbrella. But, as we've evolved over all that time, it's very, very varied experiences.
I love how you're describing that in the evolution of a business. So can you walk us through a little bit of that evolution and what you experienced through those changes, and including how you became a partner and what that meant along that journey?
Sure. I think, first of all, I think we've always maintained an entrepreneurial spirit, no matter what size we've been. And that's something that continues today. I think that it's not necessarily a core value, but it is sort of built into the marrow of the business. A startup is really exciting. Anyone that's lived through one of those, sort of knows all the steps that you have to go through and all the highs and the lows of things and the small victories I think that's where I learned that the highs are never as high as you think they are, but the lows are never as low either. Then you start to get some momentum. I loved when our entire team fit into 2 cars. Like when we were in that 6 to 10 range, because you could still be very spontaneous. You could still say, oh, it's the first warm day of spring. What work do we have to do? Can we knock off early and head out to, and sit on a deck and enjoy a beer together or whatever? That spontaneity was really cool at that time. As you grow, you lose some of that.
I'm going to jump in for a second. Jump ahead so you had that 6 to 10 people and the spontaneity. Give everyone a sense of the size of Pavone now and the different, and then we can fill in the gaps.
Sure. We have about 75 employees now, in 3 different offices, 3 different geographies. So it takes a lot more effort to be spontaneous with that number of people than it did back when we were 10. And there are merits to each side as you move through things. Like I said, I think each sort of stage, at one point I actually sort of looked at it as like life stages of a human being, where I can look back and say, oh, in our adolescence, we were this. And then we grew, and a lot of that growing as you grow larger is the systems that are behind things. So your HR function grows more, your project management function grows, it has to grow to accommodate all those people. And then I'll say we had the overlay, obviously, of technology as well. And then, multiple locations and that sort of thing. And you're always figuring out for whatever your next size is. Because about the time you build it, then you've got to break it to be ready for the next level. There's a reason that there are a lot of companies sort of stall out at that 50 to 100, because that leap, in my mind, is difficult operationally from a sales standpoint. Like, it just is a challenge. You keep lurching forward.
And how about, you make such a great point, and how about what people are experiencing as you're making those leaps? At what point in the evolution did you become a partner?
I became a partner in 2003. So we were about 10 years in. So that was at that point, I was, what would I have been? 35. So
You're still a baby.
Yeah, I was a good age. 33 was a good age, actually.
Yeah, I have Frank Sinatra in my head now.
Yes, exactly. But so it was, and for me, it was more about like, sort of, what does that mean? And now what? Because And I sort of looked outward for women who weren't necessarily in the, in the business or whatever, for some mentoring and that sort of thing, just to understand like what it all meant or what it should mean, which was kind of cool. I will say this, something I didn't talk about in being entrepreneurial and the growth of a business is there will always be people who are willing to help you. You seek them out and you ask for help, and there will always be people, the road will rise up to meet you. And I've had some extraordinary people who've crossed my path who are now friends, who are still mentors, simply because I said, I don't really know what I'm doing here. Like, can you help me? And I mean, we started the business before there was an internet. I mean, I wore a path to the state library because something would come up and I'd be like, I don't know how to do that. Like, okay, got to go figure it out, which is kind of laughable now because, our internet will go down in the office and people will just, I don't know what to do. Like, oh my God, like I have to go home. There's no internet. I'm like, okay. That's when I go back to, back in the olden days, this is what we
Yes,
did.
we would walk barefoot uphill both
Yeah.
ways to the library.
Uh-huh. Exactly.
So, what in hindsight, what advice do you have for the company going from 6 to 25 people? What's a nugget? We're
No.
6 to 50.
6 to 50. I think up till about 40, I think we had the tiger by the tail. I do think it's the systems. It's the keeping up with your growth and making sure that I talk a lot about, because we were very fortunate in that when we were based just here in Harrisburg and we had great teams in place, not that we don't have great teams now, but I talk a lot about the no look pass, where we had a team where we'd all worked together for long enough that there was a shorthand. We knew what we were talking about. If you said, hey, we're going to do something similar to when we worked on this client, and everyone around the table knew what we were talking about. Now that's harder because you just don't have the institutional memory. And in hindsight, now that I'm thinking about this, because I never really thought about that question the way that you framed it up, I think that we relied on that institutional memory too much. Sometimes a strength can become a weakness.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I'll say there was a wave during COVID where, the world opened up for people, and we lost a lot of team members who were in that 8, 10, 12 year tenure area. And we lost a lot of institutional memory, and we're still trying to recover from that because it was an overused strength.
That happened a lot. And with turnover and people, younger adults not staying in positions the way you and I used to.
Yep.
That having to think about how we make up for institutional knowledge and how people knowing how we worked with clients and what their particular needs and wants and all those things were, it was a given for so long. And now it is a challenge. How do we prepare for that? How do we invest in that differently? How do we how does it affect how you train and onboard people?
I think that there's the need for much more documentation, whether it's literally documenting things or creating videos or creating shorter videos, or, I mean, you have to train people the way that they want to learn, which I'll say for me sometimes is a challenge because I'm still that person that says, give me the manual, give me it in writing, like give me, like I am completely flummoxed by trying to put together an IKEA anything with those little diagrams, because like, give me the words, give me the steps, like that's what I want. But I think, especially when we're talking about younger people and training younger people, they're used to that shorter spurt of information. They don't want to sit through 20 minutes of video. They want to sit through 5 minutes. So it's like, how do you create something that gets the point across, but still has some element of entertainment and gets them what they need and gets them on their way? So I do think, it has been with technology, we're constantly evolving that way, and everyone is, and trying to figure it out. But that the whole notion of attention span, I think is so critical, and it just seems to be getting shorter and shorter.
Yeah, because they're ready to swipe up to the next reel. And so now it's given micro learning a whole new definition. We used to think micro learning was an hour-long video, and now micro learning is a 2.5-minute
Yes.
thing. And it's translating into the attention span of the investment of time in a work product.
Absolutely. Because we used to think more long term, and it's a double-edged sword because we used to have time to create campaigns. We used to have time to let campaigns, once they hit the marketplace, build momentum. And having that real-time feedback on one hand is great, but on the other hand, it's, we're much more quick. Clients are more quick. We're more quick to say, hey, this isn't working. We should switch it out. It's like when you see on what you would consider to be, broadcast television, like you'll have a show that airs twice and they cancel it because it didn't find an audience. And you're going, did it have time to find an audience? Like if you put a show like Seinfeld up against that scrutiny today, it wouldn't have made it, because, if someone doesn't believe in it, it's not going to make it. So I think there's a lot of that. I think clients are under tremendous pressure for all the data that they're getting and they're responsible to from a sales standpoint to really be able to make those decisions and, to sort of have the steadfastness and wherewithal to stick with something that they might say, you know what, the data doesn't necessarily support it, but my gut tells me something is right, and to bear that out. So I think that's one of the challenges that we face in this exceedingly fast-paced world that we live in and work in.
The decisions that you have to make as a partner in a business. And people think it's really glamorous to be a partner in a business. How hard is it to be a partner?
I think it's a tremendous amount of responsibility. And I've always believed that, 20 some odd years into being a partner in a business. And, you're making decisions that are impacting people, families, livelihoods, and there's responsibility in that. There's a lot of responsibility in that. There's a lot of sleepless nights in that because you want to be right and you want to do right by your teammates. You want to do right by your clients. You want to do right all the way around. And sometimes those decisions are hard. They're not popular. I think a lot of times, I don't think that people talk about how lonely it is to be a leader. Because we talk, we see sort of the glory and the, the reward and all of that sort of thing. But I think that there's a tremendous loneliness in being a leader. And that can be, that can be the leader of a business. That can be the leader of your family. That can be the leader of a church organization. That could be anywhere that you're stepping up and being a leader. I think that there is an element of loneliness too, if you're doing it right.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you say that because every leader I talk to describes that loneliness. And it's the higher up you go, the fewer people you have as peers around you. When you are an entry-level employee, even a mid-level employee, you're surrounded by peers. And then the pyramid gets smaller and smaller as you progress up a ladder. And then it's, you're one. Even as a partner, and you have other partners, it's just different. And there's this feeling of who can I talk to about this stuff? Who gets it, who gets me and what I'm feeling and what I'm thinking. And you mentioned that you have along the way reached out to people for advice, bounce things around. Those decisions about people, the decisions that make you lose sleep, how do you get through those? How do you make those decisions?
Oh, I think, I think in terms of specifically in our partnership, I think that we have a lot of dialogue around those decisions. I think we come to alignment pretty readily, but I still think that it's challenging in that because one of my strengths, and again, going back to strengths can become weaknesses, is I'm always that person that has a plan B and a plan C and maybe a plan D. So I won't say that I catastrophize things, but I can think of how things can go sideways very readily. And I always try to, if this happens, then we'll do this. And I will say 95% of everything I've ever imagined has never come to be, but I've been ready for it.
That's a gift and a curse at the same time. I'm the same way. When did that first surface for you? When do you first remember feeling like, I see 18 different paths here, the if this then that.
Sure. I don't remember when I didn't have that. And I think there was always something driving me that way. And, growing up, school, achievement, all of those sort of things, like it was rewarded. It was, like, oh, yeah, like, of course, like you're doing great. You're getting all A's, and it was rewarded. And then there comes that moment, I don't know, I'll say probably in the last decade or whatever, where I'm like, man, this is not, not all it's cracked up to be. But you can't teach an old dog new tricks. So it's like, I think being conscious of it certainly has helped me. But at the same time, I can't put it down. And maybe when I'm no longer working, I will. But I do it with everything. Like, a trip to the grocery store can be just wrought with peril.
You mean if they don't have the asparagus, I'll get the broccoli?
Yeah, like
they don't have the broccoli, I'll get the artichoke.
Or you're coming up to the checkout to the cashier line and you're like, okay, which one should I pick? Well, if I do that, then this, or it's everywhere. It's I can't, people go to restaurants and they're like, isn't this open kitchen thing great? And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's the worst possible idea. Like, I don't want to watch people making my food, because I'll start sort of like, well, if that person just focused on that and moved down the line and just stayed there, they wouldn't keep running it. Like, I start like,
oh, okay, you're
problem solving for the kitchen. Like, I'm always problem solving. Like, Starbucks, I'm like, if that one just stayed there and made coffee and that one just ran the cash register instead of bouncing around, like, it would be more efficient. Like, I'm always solving for X. It's really hard to shut off.
Well, I know, and that's
now I'm on the couch.
That's really neat, though, and that's probably why that's it has to be a huge driver of your success. But does it make you crazy when other people don't do that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Me too. And when you verbalize, do you verbalize your scenarios when you're in?
Sometimes.
Okay, so it sounds like you have a filter, or you've developed a kind of like the I feel like I should scenario map with people right now, or this is not the time?
This is not the time. Because I will say, and unfortunately my husband gets a lot of it, then it sounds like the nattering of a crazy old lady, basically. So it's just
okay. In thinking of these times that you've done the scenarios, mapping out these scenarios in your head, though, and yes, you said that X% of time, whatever, they don't happen. What percent of time did something happen and it was hugely impactful? Because I'd be willing to go to Vegas right now and put some money down.
Oh, I think there have been times where I've been able to, where I've sort of staved off something because I thought through that way. I'm trying to think of one right off the top of my head. Something doesn't come to mind, but I mean, and I'll say it's usually not sort of these dramatic, like rolling off a cliff kind of things. It's just how we get through our day-to-day work. And it's just, like, oh, we did that and it worked out. Or we planned ahead, we were proactive and we did this and it worked out. And those are things that don't always show up in the box score. Remember when we had box scores for baseball? Yeah. They don't necessarily show up there. They're not, no one's going to throw up a parade for it, but it makes things easier for people along the way, for your team along the way. And that's super, super helpful.
I've found with training that leaders are a little bit desperate for more people on their teams to be thinking the way you think, or the way you and I think. That people are super tactical. They're really good at what they do. And there's kind of a period after that sentence. And that there isn't any anticipation of scenarios. There isn't any thinking bigger than the little thing, and it might be a big thing, but thinking bigger than what it is they're working on right now and what the ripple effects of that might be. What do we do?
I have started, I'll say more recently, in sharing with people sort of what my process is.
Okay.
In terms of like, if we have a team meeting, it's like, hey, we need to think through what this looks like. Like even something as simple as like, the holidays are coming up. The office is going to be closed. Are we prepared for X, Y, and Z? We need to meet our clients' expectations. We certainly want to make sure that people can take time off. So how do we make that happen? And then sort of walk them through, first of all, ask them what the answer should be. And then I try to use questions to identify gaps that I'm thinking about. So what about this?
Love it.
Well, what if this happens, or that type of thing? So I think that that's sort of where I try to incorporate, because I think people who have worked with me long enough know if they come to me with a problem, the first thing I'm going to ask them is, well, what do you think we should do? I'm not going to give you the answer. What do you think we
Yeah.
should do?
Go look
And
it
then
up in the
that's
dictionary.
right. And then it's okay. Now let's have a conversation. I like where you're thinking. What about this? Or, hey, I like what you're thinking. Like, run with it. That's, you have the answer. But I think that's sort of where I try to incorporate that kind of thinking into the team, into how we're thinking about getting something done.
Yeah, that the leading by example, the showing by doing, being curious, asking questions. You know in your head what you want them to say, and then you need to find the way to ask the questions to pull it out of them. And frankly, to see who you can pull it out of.
Mm-hmm.
Who's got the hamster wheels spinning and is picking up on what you're saying and is able to go on that journey, and who's just kind of like, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. We need phenomenal individual contributors, but we need to be able to find the ways to figure out who those bigger thinkers are, and to teach them how to do it and to pull it out of them.
Right. Well, and when they have information that I find more and more people aren't always clear on what the information they have, what's important. So, you'll ask for a rundown of, hey, like, what's the situation? And you start asking questions, and then it's, well, the client did say this, or, the vendor did say this. And you're like, oh my God, like that should have been the lead. Like that should
Yeah.
that should have been the thing that was most troublesome, or that was the thing that we needed to solve for. And I'm like, so I think that that's part of it too, is that, it's not always obvious to people. I guess the easiest way to say it is it's not always obvious to people what the important thing is, because I do think that we get bogged down with a lot of information. That's like, how do you sift through to get to, like, this is the thing that's going to hang us up, or this is the thing that's going to cause us a problem. Again, going back to, like, I said to the team probably the beginning of November, like, let's talk to all the vendors and find out what their holiday schedules are. Because, back in the olden days, you had people closed between the week between Christmas and New Year's, so you can't, like, and who is going to be open, who is going to be working in case we do have one of those last minute kind of things that has to get done. So it's anticipating, but then also just, having that information at your fingertips and knowing which piece of information is going to be most important moving forward.
And sometimes I feel like the conversation you're describing, where the light bulbs are going off and you're sitting there thinking, gosh, that, it would have been really good to know yesterday. That might be the first time that person is actually verbalizing or processing the information they got. And so we need to, it's great that we're having those conversations, right? Because we need to teach them how to process all the information they take in. They can't just take it all in and spit something out. There's a whole processing stage in there. And we have to teach them how to parse through all that information to be able to be discerning about how to prioritize it all.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's easy for me at this stage in my career to say, look, I'm pretty damn good at that now. But I had good leaders who had those conversations with me very early in my career, and who asked the questions. So I love that you're doing that.
Yeah. I mean, something as simple as even like your to-do list, like the way someone approaches a to-do list. Like, there are people that write down a to-do list and they have their to-do list and they start with one.
Yeah.
Like, I write my to-do list and then I rewrite it and then I rewrite it again. And I'll say to people, especially in the agency, I'll say, like, your to-do list, you should be looking at your to-do list and start out with the things that other people need you to do.
Oh.
So, like, you talk about how interdependent we are in the agency world. Like it might be way more important to work on a creative brief that has to go to the team than it is to work on the conference report that has to go to the client. Like you actually have to think about it in those terms. Like, hey, if I get this done, that keeps this moving.
The dominoes.
Yes.
There
You know
are
what I
15
mean?
dominoes waiting on my one domino for
Right.
this. Yep.
And I hold the keys, right? So it's like you might want to do that before you think about doing something else. Or, think about from a business standpoint, hey, I need to make sure I have my receivables calls to make sure that, we're getting paid versus, I don't know what the other thing would be, but it's, it's that, and it's constantly shifting those priorities. Those priorities shift, 3-4 times a day, depending on what the circumstance is. And we have, 6 different ways to communicate when the priorities are changing too. So it's like, I got a text, I got an email, I got Slack, I got Basecamp, I got, so you're constantly rejiggering that list for
Notice you
yourself.
didn't say I got a phone call or someone walked in my office. No,
Right.
because
Well,
all
that happens too, actually. The walking into my office, the phone calls, not so much.
yeah, so information is coming at us. And then there are the people who walk in and say, well, what does my calendar say I have to do today? And there isn't a strategic process around what is the work I have to do? How am I going to do it? What's the most important stuff? How am I going to manage my time and my calendar?
Right.
It's
And I'm always amazed by the people who they just sort of let their day happen to them and they're successful at it. Like I wake up and I punch my day in the mouth, like straight out, before my feet hit the floor. I know the first 5 things I'm going to get done. And it just starts and it just keeps going. Right. And there is no doubt that I will wrestle my day to the ground.
That's awesome. I will say the people who just kind of go about and get stuff done and are successful, like you said, they're successful in spite of themselves. And there's a whole potential gap. Like they're probably 70 or 80% successful. And there's a whole slew of potential of what could be. And I don't mean money. I just mean there's happiness in having control. There's contentment. There's security and safety in being able to do what you do and punch your calendar in the mouth. I love that.
I do think that there is just to advocate for them though. I do think that there's some contentment in the blissful walk of the ignorant. I really do. Like I'm envious of that sometimes.
That's fair.
I'm not going to lie.
That's a very fair point. They don't get ruffled by too much.
No.
Yeah.
They're not awake when I am. I know that.
What time is that?
Oh, 2:30 is sort of the bewitching.
Is that because you wake up at 2:30 and then your mind is racing and you can't sleep? So
yeah. I have no problem falling asleep. It's just I cannot. When I wake up, I start like literally
Same.
just I cannot roll over and go back to sleep.
Same, exact same. And it isn't every single night, but it's more nights per week than it is not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I think when I'm no longer working, I think there's a very strong possibility that I will sleep twice a day. Like if I followed my natural rhythms, I would love to be able to take a nap, and I think I would sleep twice a day. Maybe not, like maybe, 4 hours and 4 hours as opposed to trying to sleep through the night. Because I like being up early. I like that quiet. I like the dark. I like puttering around. I do. I mean, and I draw energy from that. Don't ask me to do anything from 3 to 6 in the afternoon. That is not the time for me.
It's a tired time. It's a very tired time.
But I do like that early morning time. I really, really do.
I like the quiet. I like that no one else is, it's not a time when your email is pinging every 5 seconds because no one else is using that time. So it's great thinking time.
Yeah, it's a very still time. And I think we run and race and go, and I really appreciate stillness.
Is that when you're reading memoirs and looking for where everything goes wrong? Or is that in other free time? Tell us about your love of memoirs.
I've always loved nonfiction. I've always gravitated to nonfiction, even when I was a kid. My husband says I would be happier and more fulfilled if I read fiction, but I I read mostly nonfiction. But the memoirs that I love, and my dad actually started it for me. Well, Santa did, but then as I got older, it was my dad. He would give me at Christmas time, he would give me a memoir of a woman each year. And there were Lady Bird Johnson or Catherine Graham from the Washington Post, or you know Grandma Moses or whatever. And one year he gave me, it was really off the wall. He gave me a book, and it was about the women who watched the lighthouses in World War II.
Mm.
And that was the one where I went, geez, Dad, like you're really scraping the bottom of the barrel here. But it was amazing what was expected, because all, up in New England, like the men had gone off to war and the women literally were watching the lighthouses. And they were the first line of defense if anything ever came across the Atlantic and was going to attack. And so, I mean, it was great. So that's sort of where it started. The thing that I love now about memoirs, first of all, sometimes you can hear the person read their own book, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
But the thing I love about memoirs more and more is I love the people who write their story and don't let the part out about when things go bad.
Mm.
Because sometimes people gloss over that part. And I'm always looking for the chapter where things got dark. This is when I had to pick myself up. This is when I had to bounce. This is when I had to have some resilience, because there are those people that everything goes right for, but more and more, like, we are being asked to pick ourselves up time and time again, whether it's work, whether it's family, whether it's a sandwich generation, whether you're raising kids, whether you're dealing with older parents. Like, we are constantly in a state of bouncing back from what's happening. Like I said earlier, the highs are never as high, the lows are never as low. But man, the learning is in the bouncing. I'm convinced of that. And I look to something like the pandemic, and that was such a shared experience for all of us, and yet we all had a very different experience of it, depending on where we were with. There are kids at home that are trying to go to school. We're dealing with our parents, we're dealing with one another, we're dealing with, hey, I'm not used to seeing my spouse 24 hours a day, and now all of a sudden here we are.
Yeah.
And everything else that was going on. And it's like, that was a collective bounce that we've been through. And I'm really excited about the books that are going to come that are going to talk about that period, when there's been enough time to be able to say, this is what we learned from that. This is what we learned about ourselves. And this is the net of what happened. So that's why I love memoirs and just sort of things that go on in culture and society, because there's so much to learn from that. And especially that period of, like, when you have to bounce.
If you were in the process of writing your memoir, is your bounce already in the book, or is it yet to be written?
Ooh, that I don't know. I think we've all had to bounce. I lost my dad. That was a big bounce. Now there are little bounces still coming from that. This past summer, we made the decision we moved my mom closer to us. So we're selling our childhood home. My brother and sister and I were all very clear to my mom that, okay, you can give up the house. Like, don't stay for us. Like, don't hold on to things for us. But cleaning that house out really had an impact, not negatively, but just, my parents had been in that house for 45 years. That had been our homestead. And there's big bounces and little bounces, I guess. I think the thing is, you've got to surround yourself with good people, always. Good friends, good family, good colleagues. You want to be around people that pick you up. And I think that that's probably the bigger lesson in all of it is, like I said earlier, there will always be people to help, and there will always be people to love you.
And thank goodness, because those bounces and these life transitions you're describing, it's really hard. And to run a business, to do the work and keep up with the work you're doing, and to care for the sandwich generation that you're describing. How do you keep up with all that? I've been there. I've done it. My parents have both passed away, but I did that having to drop things on a moment's notice and go care for
Mhm.
aging and sick parents. And
Mhm.
I mean, it was exhausting
Yep.
emotionally and physically. How did you get through? How are you getting through?
I lean on my faith quite a bit. I think that that's whether you have a strong faith or a strong
Mhm.
spirituality, or you meditate, or you practice some kind of mindfulness. And I mean, mindfulness can be walking your dog. I mean, it does not have to
Mhm.
be any kind of formal sort of thing. But again, going back to that stillness, like there has to be a moment where you're able to sort of come back to yourself and say, I'm good. I got this. Like, today was a setback. One of my favorite quotes, I'll butcher it here, but sometimes the most courageous thing you can say is, I'll try again tomorrow,
Mm.
you know? And I live by that by and large. But, I think surrounding yourself with good people, having sort of that inner strength. And I'll go back to how I was raised again. It was just that was very much telegraphed in that, having that self-sufficiency and being able to handle it. It's not always pretty. It's not always perfect by any stretch of the imagination. You will be tested sometimes to the very brink.
Are
And
you
then
good at
humor
asking for help?
and asking for help. Sure. Sure.
Because sometimes a lot of very self-sufficient people don't like to ask for help.
Yeah, it's not my first inclination, to be honest. But, I have tried to get better at accepting help. That's been sort of a thing
Our
recently.
family, by the way, our family, whenever I hear that, I try to be better. My daughter was in first grade and she was a little terror in first grade and she was hitting the adults in the cafeteria one day. And so I made her write an apology note to the dad she was hitting that day. And she wrote, Dear Mr. Lynch, sorry about my behavior. I wish I could be better. And I made her write a new note. So yes, we try. We wish we could be better.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's all that, but I also think humor. I think at some point you just have to throw your hands up and just be like, this is insane. This is just, this is lunacy. So, so
Yeah.
stop.
Yeah. I am good at calling friends and saying, who wants to have a glass of wine? I mean,
There you
that's
go. Hey, that works
for me.
sometimes too.
Anyone who knows you has received a greeting card from you at some
Mhm.
point, I'm sure. How did
Mhm.
that come about? How did you become a greeting card guru?
That was my mom. My mom was always sending cards to, birthdays, family, shut-ins from church, like just was always sending cards. And I guess I caught on to that and really sort of internalized that. I think now especially it's so unusual for people to receive that it stands out. That's one of the pieces of advice that I give to college kids that I talk to. I'm like, when you're interviewing, send a thank you note, not a thank you text, not a thank you email, send a thank you note. It will stand out. And I think it's just a way to, again, sort of stop the world and say, you know what, for 5 minutes, the 5 minutes it took to write the note, like, and it's something that people hold on to. And I'll say it always amazes me when I turned 50. I didn't want to have a party or anything. I said to people, I sent out a thing and I said, just send me a card and tell me, and like share a memory or how we met or just something, which sort of, then it was bizarre because I got over 400 cards, and it sort of was a preview to my funeral because
Oh,
I'd read like 10 of them and I'd be in tears because I'd be like, oh my God. But the thing that I'll say more and more is that there would be people that would say, I'll never forget when you gave me this piece of advice, or I'll never forget when I got a card from you when my mom passed away or whatever. How many of those circumstances, if I'm honest, I'm like, I don't remember that.
hmm.
So the things that you do, you don't know how you're impacting someone else. And that is the lesson of all of that. So it's like a very small, you talk about the ripple effect. It's like a very small pebble can have long lasting impact, and you don't know when that's going to happen or to whom. And that's why I keep doing it.
And it is, sometimes it seems like it might take such effort to handwrite something. And it really doesn't. And I don't know what someone else's equivalent is or can be of handwriting a note. Pick up the phone and call someone and say hi a couple of times a week
Yeah,
or once a week.
sure.
Go through your phone and pick some random person you haven't talked to in a long time and call just to
Mhm.
say hi and see how they're
Yep.
doing. I mean, there's something we can do that is going to be helpful to someone. And I think we need more of that, especially right now.
You
We
can
need
never,
more.
never go wrong with if someone is on your mind or your heart, there's a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And you can never go wrong acting on that.
Ah, Amy, tell us, shifting back to business gears before we end this little shindig, tell us more about Pavone, the different businesses within Pavone, who you serve, the work you do, some of the favorite project kind of things.
Sure.
I like
So, Pavone Group is actually a holding company. It's made up of several agencies and ancillary businesses at this point. So, Pavone Group, Pavone was the original agency. We started that in 1992. Good full service agency, super regional at that time. And then we knew that we needed to in order to grow, we needed to specialize in some way. So we started Varsity, which is an agency that is focused on senior living and the mature market, which we define as 55 and older. When we defined it, I was not in that category yet. And
I was
so
like, oh my
at,
gosh, I'm almost there.
at 57, I don't know how I feel about that now, but so that's Varsity. And the idea behind Varsity really was like, if you're on the varsity team, you're in the prime. They're looking to you for your expertise and skill and all that sort of thing. And we grew vertically. There was no, we're not bound by any conflicts of interest. We work with communities all around the country. And then we did the same thing with our food and beverage experience when we founded Quench in 2014. Through acquisition, we got a company called Vigor, which focuses on restaurant branding. So those are the agencies. And then we have Wild Fig, which is data analytics. We have Hooch, which is production. We have Market Street Design, which is a variety of different design functions that are used in business. I'm trying to think, I'm sure and Media Jargon, which is our media buying and planning company now. So all of those other companies support our clients. And so, I think to an outsider, they might look at us and say, oh my gosh, you guys really are serial entrepreneurs and that you have all these companies. But I'll say the diversification makes a lot of sense. And being able to, it sort of goes back to that self-sufficiency where it's like we have teams that can
Mm-hmm.
help us achieve pretty much any goal our clients have. So it makes a lot of sense.
Diversification helpful in the sense that one group can help support the other. All ships rise together, whatever that saying is.
Something like that.
Yeah, whatever that is.
Floats all boats.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah.
High tide floats.
That.
Something like that.
Oh, you know what I'm talking about. What is there a particular project you've worked on over the course of your career that you're like, that was freaking amazing, or you just loved it so much?
Here, I'll tie this up in a bow, and it will sound very old school, but coming back to don't tell me we can't do something. So we were doing work for the Harrisburg Patriot News. They were rebranding the newspaper. So this probably was, I don't know, 20 years ago, but we were responsible for helping them rebrand their newspaper and the culture really. So we went in, we interviewed all of their employees. We went at 3 different shifts, learned everything there was to learn about the paper, and we came up with this campaign. And one of the things that they were doing, they were launching a tabloid called Go, which was going to be published every Thursday. And it was everything that was happening. So it's like, here are your movie listings, theater, what's happening in the community, cultural events, all these things, Go. And so we did this teaser campaign with green footprints, like on all of the teaser things, billboards and all that sort of thing. And we came up with the idea of painting green footprints on the sidewalks of Harrisburg for the first day that Go was going to be launched. And at the time, he was not my husband. He is now. But he went and he sold this idea to the client and came back and said, oh, by the way, they loved the idea that I had about these footprints. You're going to have to figure out how to do it. And I was like, okay, a little heads up would have been good, but okay. And so literally just started that problem solving, how are we going to do it? When are we going to do it? It has to be done. And so came up with the plan, we're going to be out there at 3:00 in the morning. I need stencils. We created these 10-foot stencils. We had teams of 2 out with the rollers and these stencils. My biggest challenge was the paint, because Crayola made the paint, but the paint came in like these tiny little tubes that you bought at Michael's or Hobby Lobby or whatever. And I was like, I need gallons of this stuff. So reached out to Crayola, created a relationship with them, and they were sending it to me in 5-gallon buckets. And we painted footprints on like 3 miles of sidewalks in downtown Harrisburg, figured out all the permits, all the legal, put out a note to all of the businesses to say, hey, we're doing this. A couple businesses came back and said, please don't paint on my sidewalk. We respected that. So, I mean, it was all those details. And then the thing that amazes me, because I don't think I could do this now, is we had 20 people, clients included. Clients showed up. We had 20 or 25 people who showed up at 3 a.m. to do this.
Paint.
We had support vehicles driving around with water and more paint. I mean, I look back on it and first of all, I can't believe we ever did it. Secondly, it was fun. At the end of it, it was done. Then we started leaking these reports to the radio station saying, what are these footprints about? Does anyone know what's going on? And then the big payoff was it was across the masthead of the paper. But I mean, just as an experience, maybe not, it wasn't the most profitable thing we ever did, or it wasn't the biggest splash or whatever, but like as the experience of bringing a team together, doing the work, having it pay off, happy client, and we all went out for breakfast and then we went to work like that. Then we started our day. I don't know. When I think about that memory, it just makes me happy, obviously.
Yeah, I can tell. You are Amy Beamer. Murray is beaming.
It was just a really cool thing to have done.
Yeah, that sounds fun. And you can imagine everybody just kind of laughing and having a good time. Like we're out here painting footprints. And like you said, that there was a payoff. And I don't mean financially. I mean the happy client, the coming together of this campaign, and that it was truly a team effort. That's the great stuff of companies and businesses. I love that. Thanks for sharing that story.
Yeah.
Where can people go to learn more about?
PavoneGroup.com is probably the easiest place to look.
And if someone wants to reach out to you directly, how can they do that?
abeamer@pavone.net is probably the easiest way to get in touch with me.
And I'll have all that in the show notes. Thank you so much for letting us go behind the curtain with you a little bit today, Amy. I really appreciate it. You're a gem.
Thank you. You are too. This was fun.
You. Thanks so much. And thanks for joining us on today's episode of Leadership Backstage. Let's see. Do I know the name of the show? Yeah. Okay. Until the next time. Thank you.
The Leadership Backstage podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and see you on the next episode.